The words hit Eleanor Vance like cold stones. "You are terminated, effective immediately." Mr. Slater, the new manager of the Gilded Spoon, did not look at her. He was busy adjusting his expensive silk tie in the reflection of a polished mirror. His voice was sharp and loud, designed for other staff members and even some diners to hear. "We are building an image here, Eleanor, a 5-star image, and you simply do not fit the brand." Eleanor kept her hands steady, folding the simple white apron she had worn for the past week. She was in her late 60s with kind eyes and hair the color of silver. Her uniform was perfectly clean but plain. "Mr. Slater," she began, her voice quiet but clear, "if I have made a mistake, please tell me. I have always been a hard worker. I was only trying to help the young man at table 7. Slater finally turned to her, a look of extreme distaste on his face. "Mistake? Your presence is the mistake. Table 7 complained you were hovering. You look more like a charity case than a member of our exclusive staff." He scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "And that young man you were helping? He is Leo Harrison, one of the city's wealthiest tech investors. He does not want to be bothered by you. He comes here for excellence, not for a grandmother." Eleanor looked past Mr. Slater's shoulder. She saw the young man, Leo Harrison, look over with a frown. He seemed uncomfortable. She also saw the other staff, young, nervous waiters and waitresses, watching the scene with fear. They quickly looked away when Slater glared at them. Eleanor's quiet dignity seemed to annoy Mr. Slater even more. She was not crying. She was not begging. "I understand," she said simply. "May I get my things from the locker?" "No," Slater snapped. "I cannot have you walking through my dining room again. It is bad for the atmosphere." He reached into his own pocket, pulled out a few small bills, and threw them onto the service counter. "This is what we owe you for the shift. Now, use the staff exit, immediately." He clapped his hands together, a sharp, final sound. "This is not a discussion. Go." The humiliation was public. Several diners were now openly staring. Eleanor felt a flush of heat on her cheeks, not from shame, but from a deep, cold anger she had not felt in many years. But she kept her promise. She remained calm. She nodded once, leaving her folded apron on the counter. She walked toward the back hallway that led to the kitchens and the exit. As she passed the kitchen door, a young busboy named Marco quickly stepped out. He was holding her worn brown coat. He pushed it into her hands, his eyes wide with sympathy. "I am so sorry, Miss Vance," he whispered, so low that only she could hear. "He is a terrible man. He speaks that way to everyone." Eleanor gave the young man's hand a gentle pat. "You are a kind boy, Marco. Do not let this place change you." She put on her coat and pushed open the heavy steel door, stepping out into the cold afternoon alley. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her away from the warmth and the rich, expensive smells of the Gilded Spoon. She stood in the alley for a moment, the cold wind biting at her face. Mr. Slater had no idea who he had just fired. He had no idea that Eleanor Vance, the quiet, elderly waitress, was actually Eleanor Darlington, the founder and CEO of Darlington Hospitality Group, the parent company that owned the Gilded Spoon and 24 other luxury properties. And he certainly had no idea that the young man at table 7, Leo Harrison, was her son. This was her son's idea. "Mother," Leo had said, "you are retiring soon, but you keep hearing reports of bad management at our new restaurants. You always said you can only learn the truth from the ground floor." So she had agreed. She had created a new identity, put on simple clothes, and applied for a job at her own company. She wanted to see for herself, one last time, if the values she had built her company on, kindness, respect, and dignity for all, were still alive. In just 1 week, she had seen enough. And today, Mr. Slater had given her the final, painful proof. He was a bully, ruling by fear and obsessed with appearances, not with true quality or service. The young man, Marco, was the only person who had shown her genuine kindness. Eleanor pulled her simple phone from her coat pocket. It was not the expensive smartphone she usually carried. She dialed a number. Her son, Leo, answered on the first ring. "Mother, are you okay? I saw what happened. I was about to come over, but you left so quickly." Eleanor's voice was no longer the quiet, humble tone of a waitress. It was firm, clear, and full of authority. "I am fine, Leo, but the restaurant is not." She started walking down the alley toward the main street. "That man, Slater, he has insulted the staff, humiliated me, and created a culture of fear. This is not what we built." "What do you want to do?" Leo asked. "I am going to finish my investigation," Eleanor said. "Mr. Slater believes I am a poor, fired old woman. For the next few days, I will let him continue to believe that. But he has a mandatory all-staff meeting on Friday. We will be attending, not as a waitress, but as the owner." Eleanor did not go home. Her large, comfortable house was on the other side of the city, but she felt a pull to stay. She needed to see more. She crossed the wide street and sat on a cold public bench, partially hidden by a large, dormant planter. From this position, she could watch the front entrance of the Gilded Spoon. She watched the wealthy patrons come and go, wrapped in expensive coats and laughing, completely unaware of the fear that existed just inside those polished doors. Mr. Slater, the manager, appeared several times at the entrance. He would smile widely at the rich guests, bowing slightly and shaking their hands. But the moment the guests turned away, his smile would vanish. It was replaced by a cold, hard expression as he gave sharp, quiet orders to the doorman. About an hour later, the staff door opened into the alley again. A young woman, a waitress Eleanor recognized named Sarah, hurried out. She was not wearing her coat. She was crying, holding her hand to her mouth as she ran. She rushed past the alley and sat on another bench, a few yards away from Eleanor, clearly trying to control her sobs in the freezing air. Eleanor waited a moment, then quietly got up and walked over. She sat down, leaving a respectful space between them. "It is a very cold day," Eleanor said softly, not looking directly at the girl. Sarah jumped, startled, and quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Oh, Miss Vance, I am sorry." She looked around, her eyes wide with fear. "You should not be here. If he sees you talking to me—" "He has already fired me, my dear," Eleanor said gently. "He cannot fire me twice." "But you are in distress. What has happened? You do not even have your coat." Sarah's composure broke. The tears came fresh and fast. It was table 4, a large family. They were difficult. They kept changing their orders, and the children made a big mess on the floor. I did my best, I truly did, but they complained to Mr. Slater that I was too slow. Her voice trembled with cold and fear. He took the entire tip, the large cash tip the father left on the table. He said it was to cover the cost of my incompetence. And then he said, if I make one more mistake this week, I will be fired just like you were. She buried her face in her hands. I need this job, Miss Vance. My mother is sick. I pay for her medicine. I cannot lose this job. Eleanor felt that deep, cold anger rise inside her again. This was not just bad management. This was cruelty. This was theft. He had no right to take your earnings, Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice firm but low. Who can stop him? Sarah whispered, looking hopeless. He is the manager. He told us on his first day that he has
full authority from the new owners to clean house. He says the old staff is lazy and that the company only cares about profits now."
This was a new, interesting piece of information. "New owners?" Eleanor asked calmly, keeping her face neutral.
"Yes," Sarah said, sniffing. "He said the restaurant was bought by some big faceless corporation, and they only care about money. That is why he has to be so strict. He wants to impress them by cutting costs and getting rid of people like you. He said you were dead weight."
Eleanor nodded slowly. Her own company, faceless. It was a painful but useful lie. Mr. Slater was telling this to his staff to justify his terrible behavior. He was using the anonymous power of the corporation as a weapon. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out the small amount of cash Slater had thrown at her, plus another, larger bill she had in her own wallet. She pressed the money into Sarah's hand.
"No, Miss Vance, I cannot." Sarah tried to pull her hand away.
"Yes, you can," Eleanor insisted, gently closing the girl's fingers over the money. "This is not charity. This is solidarity. You need this for your mother. I do not. You did a kind thing for me last week. You shared your meal with me when I forgot my lunch. I do not forget kindness." Sarah cried again, but this time with gratitude. "Thank you, thank you. You are the only person who has been kind to me here." "Stay strong, Sarah," Eleanor said, standing up. "Go back inside and get your coat before you freeze. Do your job as best you can. Do not let that man break your spirit. Sometimes things are not what they seem." As Eleanor walked away, her mind was working. She had seen the problem, she had performed a small act of kindness, and now the conflict was clearer. It was not just Mr. Slater's arrogance, it was the lie he was telling, the lie that the company's owners were heartless and greedy. He was using her name, or at least her company's reputation, to terrorize his staff. This made the all-staff meeting on Friday even more important. It would not just be about firing a bad manager. It would be about restoring the soul of her company. Her son, Leo, would be there, and she would make sure Marco and Sarah were there too. Mr. Slater was building a trap for himself, and Eleanor was going to let him. For the next 2 days, Eleanor did not return to her large home. She checked into a small, clean hotel a few blocks away from the Gilded Spoon. She felt it was important to stay close, to remain in the mindset of the humble Eleanor Vance. She spent her time walking the streets nearby, observing. She wore a simple hat and a different coat, but she doubted Mr. Slater would even recognize her. To him, she was invisible, a problem he had already solved and forgotten. She ate in small cafes, listening to the city, feeling the cold. It had been decades since she had lived so simply. It reminded her of the early days, before the success, when kindness was the only currency she had. On the second day, a cold Thursday afternoon, she positioned herself in a small bakery across the street from the alley exit of the restaurant. She bought a cup of tea and a small bread roll, and she sat by the window, watching. Just as she had hoped, she saw the young busboy, Marco, push open the steel door. He came out into the alley, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He sat down on an overturned plastic crate, pulling his thin jacket tight. He was not wearing gloves, and he rubbed his hands together for warmth. Eleanor left her tea, gathered her things, and walked calmly out of the bakery. She walked down the street and turned into the alley, as if she were just passing through. Marco looked up, his eyes widening in panic when he saw her. "Miss Vance, what are you doing here? You must go, if Mr. Slater sees you." "Good afternoon, Marco," Eleanor said, her voice calm and pleasant. She held out a white paper bag. "I was just in the bakery. They had these warm, sweet buns, and I bought an extra one. It is too much for me to eat. Would you like it?" Marco looked from the bag to her face. He was clearly very hungry. I should not,"
he whispered.
Nonsense, Eleanor said, placing the bag in his hands. A growing boy needs to eat. And you must stay warm. She looked at him with genuine concern. He is working you very hard, is he not? Marco took the warm bun, his cold fingers fumbling with the paper. He took a large bite, as if he had not eaten all day. "He is awful, Miss Vance," he said after swallowing. "Worse than before. Since you left, he feels powerful. He fired Sarah this morning." Eleanor's heart sank. He fired Sarah? Why? He said she was too slow again. But it was not her fault. He put her in charge of the 2 largest tables at the same time. It was impossible. She cried. She begged him, told him about her mother. He just laughed. He told her to go be poor somewhere else. Then he told the rest of us that she was an example of what happens when we fail him. Marco's young face was pale with a mixture of anger and fear. But that is not the worst part, Miss Vance. I think he is stealing from the company." Eleanor kept her expression perfectly calm, but her mind became sharp. "What do you mean, Marco? What have you seen?" "The deliveries," Marco said, his voice dropping even lower. "The big trucks come in the morning. Yesterday, a full case of the best French wine arrived. And boxes of the expensive steaks, the kind we only serve to the most important guests. Mr. Slater signed the paper, but the boxes never went into the main kitchen freezer." "Where did they go?" Eleanor asked. Eleanor spent that evening in her small hotel room, making plans. The time for quiet observation was over. It was time for action. She called her son, Leo. Her voice was no longer the gentle tone of a grandmother. It was the sharp, focused voice of a CEO. "Leo, our situation is more serious than I knew," she said, and she explained what Marco had seen in the alley, the stolen wine, the expensive steaks, the secret deal. Leo was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. The theft was a betrayal that went beyond simple workplace bullying. "He is not just a tyrant, he is a common thief," Leo said, his voice hard. "What do you need me to do, Mother?" "First," Eleanor instructed, "I need you to contact our head of security. I want 2 of his best officers at the Gilded Spoon tomorrow in plain clothes. They are to dine separately and wait for my signal. Second, I need you to pull all delivery invoices for that restaurant for the past month. Compare them to the kitchen's inventory and sales records. I want to know exactly how much he has stolen." "I can have those numbers by morning," Leo confirmed. "Good. Third, I need you to find Sarah, the waitress he fired today. I want her to be there tomorrow. Tell her an old friend has a new job opportunity for her, and it is very important she comes to the restaurant at 3 o'clock. There was a pause. "And, Leo, bring my gray business suit to my hotel in the morning, the good one." The next day, Friday, a heavy, nervous energy filled the Gilded Spoon. The staff whispered in corners, their eyes constantly darting to the manager's office. Mr. Slater, however, was in an excellent mood. He walked through the dining room as if he were a king, his shoulders back and a false, wide smile on his face. He believed he had broken the lazy staff. He thought he had impressed his corporate superiors by cutting costs, by firing experienced staff and stealing valuable inventory. He saw Marco polishing glasses behind the bar and stopped. "You," he said, pointing a finger, "the all-staff meeting is at 3 o'clock, in the main private dining room. Make sure it is spotless. I have very important announcements." "Yes, sir, Mr. Slater," Marco said, his voice barely a whisper. He looked down, hiding the fear in his eyes. "This is a new era for the Gilded Spoon," Slater announced loudly to the room. "An era of excellence, of profit. The corporate office is very pleased with my changes.
Today, we will finalize the transition. Be there. It is mandatory." At 5 minutes before 3, the remaining staff filed silently into the private dining room. It was a beautiful room, with dark wood walls and a long, heavy table, but today it felt like a trap. Mr. Slater stood at the head of the table, a stack of papers in front of him. He looked powerful and pleased. Marco stood near the back wall, his heart pounding. The other waiters and kitchen staff looked at the floor, expecting the worst. "Close the door," Mr. Slater commanded. A waiter did as he was told, and the heavy door shut with a quiet final click. "Welcome," Slater began, spreading his hands wide. "Thank you for being here. As you know, I was brought in by the new corporate owners to fix this restaurant, to make it profitable. The old, soft, family way of doing things is over." He picked up a sheet of paper. "I have analyzed all of your performances, and I have decided that several of you are no longer a good fit for the brand." He smiled, a cold, thin smile. The staff tensed, and one of the young waitresses put her hand to her mouth. "But before we get to that," Slater continued, "I want to introduce our new rules. From this day forward, all customer tips will be pooled and managed directly by my office. Your break times will be reduced by 5 minutes, and the staff meal is canceled to save costs." A small gasp came from the staff. He was not just a bully. He was taking their food and their money. "Now," Slater said, his voice sharp as he looked at his list, "the first person who will be leaving us is—" Just as he was about to speak the name, there was a loud, firm knock on the locked dining room door. Slater's face turned red with anger. "Who dares to interrupt my meeting?" he shouted. The door opened. It was not a staff member. It was Leo Harrison, the wealthy tech investor. Mr. Slater's anger instantly vanished, replaced by a confused, nervous smile. "Mr. Harrison, what a surprise! I was just in a staff meeting. Can I help you?" "I am not here for you, Slater," Leo said, his voice cold. He stepped aside, holding the door open. And into the room walked Eleanor. She was no longer Eleanor Vance, the humble old waitress. She was Eleanor Darlington, CEO of Darlington Hospitality Group. She wore an expensive, perfectly tailored gray suit. Her silver hair was elegant. Her eyes were not kind, they were powerful, and they were fixed on Mr. Slater. Mr. Slater's jaw dropped. He stared. "You," he stammered. "You? But you are fired. What is this? This is a private meeting." "Yes, it is," Eleanor said, her voice clear and strong, filling the silent room. "It is my meeting. You are in my building. You are in my restaurant. And you have been terrifying my staff." Mr. Slater sputtered, his mind struggling to connect the two realities. He looked from the powerful woman in the suit to her son, Leo, and back to the memory of the old, humble waitress. What is this nonsense?" he demanded, trying to regain his composure. "Mr. Harrison, I apologize for this vagrant. She must have followed you in. Security! Someone call security!" "Security is already here, Mr. Slater," Leo said, his voice hard as steel. At the back of the room, 2 men in simple suits, who had been dining quietly in the restaurant for the past hour, stood up. They moved to stand on either side of the heavy door, blocking the only exit. Mr. Slater's face went white. The room was so quiet, the staff members were afraid to breathe. They stared at Eleanor, their minds slowly piecing together the impossible truth. Marco, the young busboy, felt a wave of adrenaline. He looked toward the doorway and saw that Leo had not come alone. Standing just behind him, her eyes wide, was Sarah, the waitress Slater had fired. Leo had found her and brought her as promised. "You will not be calling anyone, Mr. Slater," Eleanor said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence and held every person in the room. "You fired Eleanor Vance. You are now addressing Eleanor Darlington." She let the name settle. The staff gasped. Even the chefs in the back knew that name. It was the name of the entire hospitality group, the name on the front of the building. Mr. Slater began to tremble, his hands visibly shaking. "No, no, that is impossible," he whispered. "Mrs. Darlington she's in retirement. She is standing in front of you," Eleanor said, taking a step closer. "I am the founder and CEO of Darlington Hospitality Group. This is my restaurant. This is my company. And you, sir, are the worst kind of employee I have ever encountered." Eleanor's gaze was direct and unblinking. "I took a job as a waitress in my own company because I heard rumors that the values I built this business on, respect, dignity, and kindness, were being forgotten. I needed to see for myself. You did not disappoint. You are not a manager. You are a bully." She turned slightly and gestured to Sarah, who took a brave step into the room. "You humiliated and fired me for an act of kindness. You terrorized this staff, calling them deadweight. You stole the cash tips from Miss Sarah, a young woman working 2 jobs to pay for her mother's medicine. And then you fired her for a failure that you deliberately set up." Slater's face was slick with sweat. "No," he protested, his voice high and weak. "This is a misunderstanding. I was acting on orders from corporate. They demanded I cut costs, improve profits. I was doing my job." "Profits?" Eleanor's voice turned to ice. "Let us discuss profits." She looked at her son. "Leo?" Leo, who Slater now understood was not just a tech investor, but Leo Darlington, the heir, stepped forward. He held a thin folder. "Mr. Slater, you claimed to be cutting costs," Leo began, his voice cold and analytical. "Yet in the last 2 months, you have signed delivery invoices for over $30,000 worth of premium French wine, Japanese steak, and Russian caviar, none of which ever made it to the kitchen inventory." Marco's eyes went wide. He had been right. "We have," Leo continued, "the signed delivery slips, the kitchen's own inventory logs, and a very clear video from the security camera in the alley. It shows you personally loading my mother's property into an unmarked car twice a week. You were not improving profits, Mr. Slater. You were stealing them." The truth hit the room. Slater was not just cruel. He was a common thief. He collapsed into the chair at the head of the table, the papers scattering. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, raw fear. "Please," he whimpered, looking at Eleanor. "Please, Mrs. Darlington, I can pay it back. It was a mistake. Please do not call the police." "It was not a mistake," Eleanor said. "It was a choice. You chose to be cruel. You chose to be a thief. And now you must face the consequences." She looked at the 2 security officers by the door. "Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Slater from the building. The city police are waiting for him at the front desk." The 2 officers moved forward and took Slater by his arms, pulling him to his feet. He did not resist. He was a broken man. "No, please, my reputation, my life." Eleanor watched him as the officers pulled him toward the door. "You told me," she said, her voice clear, "that I did not fit the brand of this restaurant." She paused. "You are wrong. It is you, Mr. Slater, who does not fit my brand." The officers opened the door and pulled the weeping man out. The door clicked shut, leaving a stunned, perfect silence in its wake. The great reveal was complete. The heavy silence in the room stretched for a full minute after the door closed. The staff stood frozen, looking at Eleanor Darlington with a mixture of awe, relief, and terror. She was not a poor old woman. She was the most powerful person in their world. Eleanor's stern expression softened. She looked at the faces in front of her, young, tired, and frightened. She turned to Sarah, who was still standing by the door, her hands clasped in front of her. "Sarah," Eleanor said, her voice now warm, "Mr. Slater told you that you were fired. He was wrong. He did not have the authority." Eleanor walked over to the young woman. "I saw how you handled that difficult family last week, before I was terminated. You were patient, you were professional, and you were kind, even when they were not. That is the true brand of this company. I would be honored if you would return to the Gilded Spoon, not as a waitress, but as the new assistant manager, to help me rebuild this team." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of sadness. "Me? But I have no experience." "You have integrity. You have compassion. You have a strong work ethic," Eleanor replied firmly. "I can teach you how to manage. I cannot teach you how to be a good person. You already are one. Will you accept?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak, and just covered her mouth with her hand. Eleanor smiled, and then turned her gaze to the back of the room, finding Marco. The young busboy stood tall, his fear gone. "Marco," Eleanor said, and the boy walked forward. "You were the first person to show me kindness here, and you were brave enough to see the truth. You saw a crime, and you wanted to report it, even at great personal risk. That kind of honesty is rare, Marco. It must be rewarded." She continued, "We have a management trainee program in this company. It comes with a full scholarship for hospitality college. It is for our brightest, most promising employees. It is yours if you want it." Marco's jaw dropped. "A scholarship? College?" he stammered. "No one in my family has ever been to college." "Well, you will be the first," Eleanor said with a smile. She then addressed the entire room. "To all of you, what you experienced under Mr. Slater was an injustice. It was not this company. It was the failure of one deeply corrupt man. I am officially delaying my retirement. I will be here, personally, to oversee the hiring of a new general manager. Effective immediately, all of your tips are your own. The staff meal is reinstated, and from now on, my door is always open." A small sound, like a collective sigh of relief, filled the room. For the first time in months, the staff of the Gilded Spoon looked at each other and smiled. The next 6 months transformed the restaurant. Mr. Slater was found guilty of theft in a court of law. He was ordered to pay back every dollar he had stolen and was banned from ever working in the hospitality industry again. His name was ruined. True to her word, Eleanor hired a new general manager, a kind and experienced woman who believed in teamwork. Sarah flourished as the assistant manager. She was fair and compassionate, and the staff respected her because they knew she was one of them. Marco began his college classes in the mornings and trained as a server in the evenings, his future bright. One cold evening, almost a year after that terrible day, Eleanor and Leo sat at table 7. The restaurant was full, buzzing with happy conversation and warm light. Sarah, in a smart suit, oversaw the dining room with a confident smile. Marco, now a poised young waiter, came to their table. "Good evening, Mrs. Darlington, Mr. Darlington. May I recommend the new autumn soup? The chef created it today." "That sounds wonderful, Marco. Thank you,"
Eleanor said, looking at him with pride. As Marco walked away, Leo reached across the table and placed his hand on his mother's. "It is good to have you back, Mother," he said. Eleanor looked around the room. She saw the staff working together, laughing quietly. She saw the guests enjoying their food, relaxed and happy. This was what she had built. This was her legacy. "I never truly left, Leo," she said softly. "I just had to remind them what home felt like." True value lies not in our appearance or our position, but in our character and how we treat those with the least power.